Okay, welcome back to the Blender 3 Docwalk, and today we are going to be covering the node parts document. So let's jump right in here. Alright, I went ahead and set this up so we could quickly explain what's happening here. You'll notice I've laid out several nodes, and each node has a title. We've got value, integer, boolean, string, vector, color. Is great. I changed that. The original name is color, but I changed it for a reason. You can change the title of your node. So if you right click on that node, you'll see it says rename here. You can also hit F2 as is noted. I'm going to go ahead and hit F2. In order to rename it with the keyboard shortcut, it has to be selected first. So I'm going to hit F2 and it will just bring that back to its traditional name there, color. Okay. You can collapse your nodes by hitting this little down arrow here. You can also accomplish this by hitting the keyboard shortcut H, simply H. Alright, now we're going to move on to talking about sockets. Sockets are these little colored circles you see at the edges of your node. And each of the colors represents something specific. But just like you can collapse your node by hitting H, okay, just collapse it up to the title, you can collapse all of the unused sockets by hitting Control H, like this. Okay, now you'll notice that original relative stays there. That is typical. Things that are not related to your sockets will not collapse. Like for instance, if I collapse color, I think it already is collapsed here. Uncollapse it, the color node comes up. So anything that isn't, directly related to a socket, it's going to just stay there. I guess as an example, we can drag this Boolean. Whoops. One more thing to note, make sure you have the node selected that you're working with. Like what just happened now, I went to go grab the Boolean here, but it moved color around. That's going to happen. You want to make sure you've got your node selected that you're working with, and then grab its socket and pull it over to where you want it to go. Okay, now you'll see that Boolean, that both these sockets, this one and this one, are connected. If I hit Control H, it's going to collapse everything except for separate children, like that. One thing I forgot to mention, so your sockets, there are two types of sockets. You have the ones on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. The sockets on your right-hand side always appear on the upper right-hand side. These are your output sockets. And the sockets on the left-hand side, which will appear on the lower left-hand side, like you see here and on geometry, and these ones down here in object, these are your input sockets. So output sockets always connect to the input sockets, right? And so the flow of your socket diagram, the flow of your node tree goes from left to right. Okay, always moves from left to right. So the flow will always flow from the output sides to the inputs of whatever next node you have set up. So that's going to be the flow of things. Just keep that in mind. It always flows from left to right. All right, so let's quickly talk about the different colors of your sockets. That's one of the reasons I set this up like this. So let's quickly look at these guys. Your gray sockets, this is your float, anything with a float value. Okay, this can represent several different things, but you see how this has a decimal point in its numeric representation. It's a float value. It's not a straight integer value. Now, the green ones right here, this is in the documentation, they refer to it as lime green, though that doesn't look very lime green to me, but whatever. So integer, this is a non-decimal value. You can see I can drag it up and down. It can go into the negatives and positives, but there are no decimal values. It's just going to be a straight up integer. Moving on, the Booleans are pink, and we already kind of touched on that. So again, it doesn't really feel pink to me. It kind of comes off more like a purplish color, but yeah, that's your Boolean value. Your strings are this kind of sky blue color. The documentation refers to it as light blue. Vectors are this kind of darker blue color. Colors are this yellow color. Shaders, let's see, geometry nodes don't have shaders, so let's jump to shading, where I've already got this set up as well. Okay, so a shader is bright green, and you will see here this bright green color that represents shader input and output. Okay, now we're going to jump back over to geometry nodes, and we're going to take a look at the geometry sockets. So you'll see here the geometry sockets are this kind of turquoise color. I've got one here, here, here. Okay, so geometry input and output used with geometry nodes is this sort of turquoise color. Side note, you'll notice here in the join geometry node that we've got this kind of elongated socket. That's just telling us that we can connect more than one output to that input. All right, and the object inputs and outputs, the object sockets are this orange color. And you'll notice this field here, right? I can select that and just go select whatever object I want to stick in there. So there we go. Now it's using the cube as the object input for this node. Okay, now if we jump down here, we'll see the white socket. The white sockets transmit collection information. Collections like right up here, right? We've got our collection of this scene. We've got the camera, cube, and light. Okay, so that's a collection, right? A collection of objects. And finally, last but not least, we're going to jump back over to, well, let's see. Did I set it up over here? I did. Okay. So this is an image socket, image in and image out. In the documentation, it says the image sockets are apricot colored. I'm seeing yellow. So I don't know what to think about that, but yeah, it's the same over here. So, you'll notice, okay, this is color, right? But you'll notice that the color data is being pulled through as an image. So I think, yeah, I don't know exactly what to think about that. It says it should be apricot, but I'm seeing yellow everywhere. So, just roll with the punches, I guess. Okay, now speaking of images, you'll notice that up here, there's this kind of little, like the materials icon, right? Kind of like this guy over here. If you click on that, it will bring up a preview of that image. So now we've got the preview going. So that basically toggles the preview panel for that node. Okay, we're going to jump over to geometry nodes. And we're going to kind of take a look at some of the properties with these guys. So sometimes you will have, as you can see, separate children, right? We connected the Boolean value, and this checkbox toggles that value. So on, off, right? Or 1, 0, 1, 0, true, false, whatever you want to use it as. But as we connect it over here, now it's using that output as this input. That's why the checkbox disappeared from here. I can use or set this natively. Okay, if I want it to be separate children on, I will click that, and that is the value is going to feed into the node. Sometimes, like you can see here, you'll see that there's no inputs, right? That's because this is a generator. You can specify it and use it as an input for other nodes. In fact, several of these are of that variety. So just be aware, when you connect something up, it's going to get rid of your ability to change that. Otherwise, you can just set it there in the options itself. Pretty cut and dry stuff, right? There are two types of value conversions that you can do between different socket types. For instance, you'll notice color, right? We've got a color socket here. If this was an input, I could take my vector output and pull it into the color input. The reason being is that color is represented with 3 values, right? Red, green, and blue, RGB. Well, vectors are represented with 3 values as well. So, it will convert each of these values to the best of its ability to fit the color value. Several of these are like that. You can kind of play around and move stuff around and try to figure out what does what. But the ones they kind of recommend to keep an eye out is converting a float value to an angle. It will automatically convert it to radians. Even if your scene unit is set to degrees, it will convert it to radians anyway. The reason being, they say, is because the value has no unit, right? It's just a straight, raw float value. So if you try to plug it into an angle input, it's just going to assume radians. Let's see. You can convert. So that's an implicit. Okay, that's implicit conversion, where you can just pull one output and stick it into another input. This obviously doesn't work. It will tell me that the values won't convert correctly or won't convert at all by giving my my line that red color. So you can convert between color and vector, between color and float. When you do this, it will, if you go from color to float or float to color, it's going to give you a gray value, since there is just one value being transferred back and forth. And you can convert either a color, a float, or a vector to a shader, in which case it's going to give the result as an emission node. Now, you can do explicit conversions, which requires bringing up a conversion node. Okay, so we're going to open our add menu by holding shift down and hitting A. And let's see here. Let's find a good example. Well, float to integer. That's a pretty sort of standard conversion, but this being an explicit conversion, you can actually kind of tweak how the conversion happens. So you can round, you can floor, bring it down, ceiling, to the next one up, right? Truncate, just knock it off without any alteration to the integer side of the value. So yeah, this is float in, integer out. That's an example of an explicit conversion. There are several others depending on what editor you're in, but yeah, so that's the difference between explicit and implicit value conversion. It did mention, why don't we just do this one more time? Let's go down to utilities, pull up the math node, and the math node does have several methods for converting values. There's several different nodes that do a bunch of different kind of weird little things. Some you could consider a direct, obvious, explicit conversion. Some are a little bit more subtle, but yeah, you just kind of have to get in there and play around with them and try to figure them all out. Okay, so that was node parts, and I will see you guys in the next video. If you found this content helpful and you've been following along and doing everything with me, do me a favor and just hit the like button or go down and hit the subscribe button. It will do a lot to help the channel get moving. So again, I appreciate everybody that's been watching. I will see you guys in the next video.